Welcome to the lesson. In this lesson, you'll learn about complex sentences. You'll learn how to identify complex sentences and have a go at writing them. If you see this icon on the screen, it means that a worksheet or a video is available for you in the description below. The worksheet for this lesson can be found at link number 1. Download it now if you haven't already. Before we look at complex sentences, we'll quickly review independent clauses and dependent clauses. An independent clause is a clause that is a completed thought. It has a subject and a verb. It can stand alone as a sentence and make sense. For example, our family went for a walk. A dependent clause is not a completed thought. It cannot stand alone. It needs the help of an independent clause. For example, since it was Saturday. It doesn't make any sense by itself, but we can join it with our independent clause, and here we have a complex sentence. Our family went for a walk since it was Saturday. It is a complex sentence because it is a combination of an independent clause and a dependent clause. The dependent clause can go at the end of the sentence, as it is in this example, or it can begin the sentence. If we moved the dependent clause to the beginning, it would look like this. Since it was Saturday, our family went for a walk. If we put the dependent clause first, we must use a comma to separate the clauses. View the video from link number 2. Watch it all the way through before continuing the lesson. Activity 1. In this activity, you will be given some complex sentences. Your job will be to find the independent clause and the dependent clause in each. Let's have a go together. Whenever I go out in the sun, I wear a hat. Can you see the part of the sentence that is a completed thought? Here it is. I wear a hat. Because it makes sense on its own, it's an independent clause. This is a dependent clause. Whenever I go out in the sun. Can you hear that it doesn't make sense on its own? Here are the complex sentences you'll be working with. Remember, for each, find and write down the independent clause and find and write down the dependent clause. Remember, independent clauses make sense on their own. Dependent clauses don't. Download the lesson worksheet by clicking on link number 1 if you haven't already. Pause the video here until you've finished. Let's have a look at the answers. First, I'll go through the independent clauses. Notice they all make sense on their own. Claire jumps. Mark decided to watch a movie. The class were told to read the book. Take a rest. His mother put the broom in his hands. These are the dependent clauses. These don't make sense on their own. Whenever she sees a spider. Although it was late. Even though they had already read it. If it's too heavy. Before he could argue. Activity 2. In this activity, you are going to join clauses to form complex sentences. But before you can join them, you'll need to know the special words that act as glue to join dependent and independent clauses. These special words are called subordinating conjunctions. Common subordinating conjunctions include because, since, whenever, when, whereas, if, although, while, even though. Let's go back to the set of sentences from Activity 1 to see if we can find some. Did you spot any? Here they are. Now the last one, before, wasn't on our list, but remember that this isn't a complete list. Here's your activity. Choose the correct subordinating conjunction to complete each complex sentence. Make sure you write down the entire sentence. Pause here until you're finished. Now let's go through some answers. Even though it was cold, he decided to go swimming. I decided to go for a walk while my dinner was cooking. If it starts to rain, we will need to leave. Kelly went for a run because she was feeling energetic. Whereas Jake was excited for the movie, Cal was feeling a little scared. Activity 3. In Activity 3, you will be given 2 clauses and a selection of subordinating conjunctions to join them. Choose the correct conjunction and write down the new complex sentence. Here's an example. The water boils. Turn off the stove. The conjunctions I have to choose from are until, when, and although. I can see that the conjunction when will work. I could write, turn off the stove when the water boils. I've placed the dependent clause at the end, but I could also write, when the water boils, turn off the stove. If I write it this way, with the dependent clause first, I will need to make sure I include a comma. Choose the correct conjunctions to join the clauses and create complex sentences. Write each complex sentence down on your worksheet. Remember, you can change the order of the clauses. Pause here until you're ready to move on. Let's have a look at the answers. Although the test was difficult, Connor felt confident. Even though she had left home early, Karen was late. Or, Karen was late even though she had left home early. When I eat too much sugar, I get silly. Or, I get silly when I eat too much sugar. Whenever Sally sings, Max gets a headache. Or, Max gets a headache whenever Sally sings. Since he finished his chores, Jake could play video games. Or, Jake could play video games since he finished his chores. Activity 4. In Activity 4, you will be writing your own complex sentences, using pictures to help you. For example, here's a picture I'm going to use to help me come up with a complex sentence. Here are some conjunctions I can choose from. I'm going to write, although the fishermen weren't out for long, they caught a lot of fish. I know this is a complex sentence because it has a dependent clause and an independent clause. Now it's your turn. You're going to write 5 complex sentences. Start by looking at these pictures. Then choose a conjunction from the box. If you need a bit more help, use the following dependent clauses. Whenever the boat hits a wave. After I got off the ride. Because it was a sunny day. You don't need to use these if you feel confident. Pause here until you're finished writing your 5 complex sentences. Now for this activity, you'll have to check your own answers. Check that each sentence has an independent clause and a dependent clause. And check that if you started with a dependent clause, you used a comma. Here were some complex sentences I've come up with. The boy feels scared whenever the boat hits a wave. Whereas I love scary rides, my sister hates them. Whenever she gets a chance, Patricia rides her motorbike. Well done on completing another lesson. Just for fun, before you go, create a complex sentence using one of these pictures for inspiration. Leave your complex sentence in the comments below. See you soon for another lesson.